Hi, everyone, and welcome to our video today. I'm Steph, the head of content strategy here at Moving to Canada. And since we're getting closer and closer to the year end, which is crazy to say, my colleague Rebecca and I wanted to walk through what we expect to see in Canadian immigration next year in 2026.
Hi everyone, I'm Rebecca Major, a regulated Canadian immigration consultant and the operations manager at Moving to Canada. And yes, 2026 is already shaping up to be a very big year for Canadian immigration.
Exactly. Over the past 5 years, there have been some pretty significant changes almost every single year. We've seen category-based laws introduced, paused, expanded, with high PMP allocations. Those were slashed and now they've been increased again. And I think understandably, people are sort of wondering what's actually confirmed for 2026. So in today's video, we're focusing specifically on changes that are confirmed. They're already in government reporting, policy announcements, or it's in legislation. In other words, this is stuff you can be relatively certain about for Canadian immigration in 2026.
So to get things going, I think at least recently the biggest announcement has been the brand new express entry category for physicians with Canadian work experience. This is just a major shift. So for years, internationally trained doctors have really struggled to transition to permanent residency status, even if they're already working in Canada. And so this is a huge step forward for those people.
Okay, so who qualifies under this new category?
So there's 3 key requirements, and they are substantially different from the kind of current categories as we know them. So they need to have at least 1 year of continuous work experience in Canada. They must be eligible in one occupation, and it must have been gained within the last 3 years. So it's really a merge between CEC and categories as we know them. It does apply to a limited number of occupations, including general practitioners and family physicians, specialists and surgeons, and clinical and laboratory medical specialists. And so for doctors who do meet the criteria, this is one of the most direct pathways we've seen for them in a long time. For me, though, it signals a much more of a targeted approach in how applicants could be selected moving forward. It's a shift beyond just kind of listing priority sectors on paper, and it's increasingly aligning them with those people that are already in Canada, already working, already part of the system. So in this case, it's not a case of we need more doctors, it's we need more doctors who are already here, already building Canadian experience, and who can realistically transition to PR much faster than anyone else. Again, from a policy standpoint, I think this totally makes sense. It helps fill urgent gaps, or at least continuation of employment where they would otherwise have to leave, reduces the risk of newcomers coming without being able to get licensed, and it rewards the people that are already in Canada working. So this is something that the express entry system has kind of thus far failed to do, even after it's gone through many iterations and updates, like you said, in the last 5 years alone. And it really does make sense to test this with doctors, just because, again, internationally trained physicians do have such a high barrier to enter the profession once in Canada. Anyone that's already working here, you really want to keep them here. And under previous rules, those individuals may have been overlooked because they perhaps didn't have a higher CRS score in comparison to a younger person, for instance. I think it's a massive progress made to using the express entry system to target people that are already contributing, not just similar profiles, people of different backgrounds, occupations, things like that. We don't know exactly how many physicians will be selected into this new category or the impact it will have on the current healthcare category. But given the massive shortage of physicians in Canada, it has to be substantial enough for real world impact and not just kind of like a progress on paper. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what impact that will have in 2026.
And I would like to note the support for physicians doesn't just stop at these category-based draws. The federal government is also allocating an additional 5,000 provincial nominee program spaces specifically for licensed doctors with job offers. The important thing to note here is that these spots are in addition to existing PMP allocations. So provinces won't be like stealing from their allocation for the year to nominate doctors. These are extra spaces carved out specifically for healthcare needs. Speaking of PMPs, Rebecca, do you want to walk us through the big reversal in PMP allocations for 2026?
Yeah, so 2026 will see the rise and return of the Provincial Nominee Program. So in 2025, PMP allocations were cut by about 50%. It was a huge story back then. Originally, they had planned 55,000 for this year, but for 2026, the Federal Immigration Levels Plan sets the PMP allocation at actually 91,500. So that's a huge jump from where we are in 2025. It's such a substantial increase, and we do expect that to translate to more frequent and larger PNP-linked express entry draws, although we aren't exactly sure yet how provinces will distribute their allocation between express entry aligned programs and non-express entry aligned programs. How much of an impact it has on the express entry system remains unknown, but for sure it will have some positive impact.
Yeah, and I think just amongst PMP in general, not express entry only, I think it does mean that we can expect to see more frequent and a larger size PMP rounds at the provincial level that we saw return towards the end of this year versus the very infrequent and often really tiny draws that we saw in the first half of 2025. That is real news for anyone who's in any kind of role that might be eligible for a provincial nominee program in 2026.
I think for 2025, certain people dismissed PMPs because it makes sense. There was so many people and so little spots available, but I really do think a 2026 immigration strategy will have to include some kind of PMP element to it. You're not going to do yourself justice if you're not exploring what PMP options are available.
And even, I think, especially for temporary residents, just looking across Canada and seeing if there are any kind of PMPs that you can align yourself with and trying to make the most of that work permit in the province that you potentially have the best chance of being eligible for a PMP. It's not a guarantee. There's not a PMP program for every person, but it's a good idea to take a look. The next sort of certainty we have for Canadian immigration in 2026 is the French-speaking permanent resident target. So for 2026, Canada has confirmed a target of 30,267 French-speaking permanent residents outside of Quebec. That's about 9% of total admissions. It was walked back from the 9.5% that was originally slated, I think, in the immigration levels plan for 2025 to 2027, but 9% is still a pretty huge amount of people who will be coming through Canada's economic programs and who will be settling across Canada as permanent resident. We don't know exactly how many of these will be express entry, non-express entry, but what we can say with relative confidence is that French category-based draws are here to stay in 2025. I would say that the pilot programs that are designed to get French speakers in as temporary residents are also relatively safe for the upcoming year. And I do believe that learning French in 2026 to boost your odds of immigration still remains a really strong strategy.
I would agree with that. And I think it won't always be that case though. So I mean, there's a fine line between jumping on the bandwagon whilst it's hot and missing the boat. And I think 2026 will be still a good year for French speakers. Getting into 2027 for me is a bit less obvious, especially as more and more people do learn French. We've been saying this on repeat now for at least the last year that you should really be learning French. I know it's easier said than done, but it will get to a point where it doesn't make sense anymore. We're not there yet, but it's going to be approaching and time goes fast. We know things change. If it's something that you're considering, you're still good for now, but you won't be good indefinitely, basically.
Yeah, I did cover the increase in CRS cutoffs for French draws. We're recording on December 17th, so we just had the huge French draw with the CRS of cutoff of 399. Looking at the draw size and the CRS cutoffs from 2024 compared to this one, it's shown a really significant increase in competition in the category alone. So while 399 is a much more approachable CRS cutoff than we've seen in any other category or program draw in 2025, it's still higher than what it was in 2024, and it may jump up again in 2026.
For 2026, French I think is still going to be good, but you're pushing your luck if you start December 2026. Take this as a sign to start sooner rather than later.
All right, that's French. On to the next one.
But yeah, the next one is a huge change for international students, particularly those pursuing advanced degrees. So starting January 1st, 2026, Masters and PhD students at public institutions are going to be exempt from a provincial or territorial attestation letter. Hopefully it will encourage more people to pursue those higher degrees without the worry of those caps in place. In addition to that, PhD student permits will be issued within 14 days, which again is a massive improvement on current processing times. They're trying to really emphasize and make it too good to be true to like pass up on a master's degree, public university. university, for instance. But note that it's not applicable to every type of master's or PhD. It's for public institutions only. So that will be a good one for those international students that are worried about caps and all that stuff going on.
The next change we wanted to talk about is the NOC system update that's scheduled for 2026. Canada updates its National Occupation Classification System, the NOC system, every 5 years. Statistics Canada has confirmed that the 2026 update will be published in December 2026. The change we're expecting this year is what Statistics Canada calls a virtual change cycle. There was a major overhaul in 2021. This one should be a little bit less significant. StatsCan will mostly be looking at like job titles, job descriptions, that kind of thing, as opposed to huge, like sweeping structural changes like what we saw in 2021. But they would still matter quite a lot for express entry eligibility and broader programs.
Yeah, so once the change does happen, especially in 2021, because it was such a big update that they did, they first announced it in December 2021, but it came into force sometime in 2022. So whenever it does come into force, anyone with an active express entry profile or provincial expression of interest must review the NOC codes they've selected to make sure that they're still the right ones. Make sure that your job or the NOC code for your job hasn't moved in the process of them changing kind of the job titles and descriptions and stuff. That would be really important and can have repercussions on kind of category-based eligibility and things like that. Then on to another change. In August 2025, ICC announced that it's going to add the TOEFL Essentials test as an approved language test. So I think it's always beneficial when applicants have more selection available to them. It's not yet accepted, but historically, once ICC do announce this kind of addition, the formal acceptance will follow, and we expect that to happen sometime in 2026. For now, though, we do not recommend that you take the TOEFL Essentials for immigration purposes. Stick to the ones that are currently approved because we don't know when that one will be added to the list officially.
We have covered the English language test and compared them because we know that certain tests will appeal to certain. So people can, and I guess do, get better results by switching to a different provider because different tests play to different people's strengths. So we will update our easiest English language test content whenever that happens. But if you're interested in seeing what that looks like now, I recommend checking the link that is on the screen. The next two that we plan to discuss are confirmed in the budget 2025, but we don't have very many details at this point. The first is that the federal government has confirmed a one-time allocation of 33,000 permanent resident spaces for in-Canada work permit holders. This is across 2026 and 2027. Details are limited at this point, but we know that the focus will be on workers with strong community ties, people who are already contributing to the Canadian economy, and it will place an emphasis on rural and regional areas.
Along the same lines, the budget 2025 also indicated that there were plans for an accelerated pathway for H-1B workers. With the H-1B workers in the US, there was mention that they will run a special program to move more H-1B holders to Canada. There's very limited information. There was a program targeting H-1B visas back in 2021, which was very popular. We don't know whether it's going to mimic that, who it's going to attract. So again, the information is really vague right now, but that would be definitely one to look out for. It will likely not have a huge impact on kind of permanent residency pathways like express entry right now, but as more H-1B holders come into Canada to work, gain Canadian experience, we might see a knock-on effect of those candidates in 2027 and 2028.
All right, so those are the confirmed changes that we know are coming in 2026, or we know with relative certainty at least. IRCC has changed its mind in the past. It announced a Tier 4 and 5 PR pathway that appears to have been shelved. As always, nothing is guaranteed in Canadian immigration. If there was anything in this that you heard and that you'd like to stay in the loop about, we would love to see you join our community. We send regular email updates covering Canadian immigration and settlements.
Just head to our homepage and subscribe by the form that you'll see on the screen.
And if you're keen for a little bit more speculation than what you got today, just wait for our next video. Rebecca and I are going to talk about what we don't know yet, but what we expect is coming, and we're going to share our predictions for express entry in 2026. We really hope to see you there. Bye.